I'm ready for my life to change.
ABC Sunday, American Idol returns.
Give it your all. Good luck. Come out with the golden ticket.
Let's hear it.
This is a man's world.
I've never seen anything like it.
And a new chapter begins.
We're going to Hollywood!
Carrie Underwood joins Lionel Richie, Luke Bryan, and Ryan Seacrest on American Idol. Season premiere Sunday, 8/7 Central on ABC and stream on Hulu.
Ampire. Hey babies, hey babies, hey babies, hey babies. Hi everyone. Happy Thursday. What's up? What's up? What's up? I have to think about something here, Callow. I want you to walk me through this a little bit. I got a couple, there was just one message on Twitter, but I didn't disagree with it. That someone wrote to me and he said, on the podcast, if you shift away from football, I'm out. And I went, you know what? You make an interesting point. I've thought about this. So for the radio show, I think we can talk about anything. But for the podcast, do I just do the football stuff? What do you think? What do you think I should do about that moving forward?
I would have to agree with said Twitter user in terms of the audience that you've garnered on the online part, like our YouTube page, your YouTube page, shouldn't say our, but your YouTube page and that side. I've even seen the numbers. When we don't start with the Commanders, the numbers plummet to a quarter of what they normally are. And to be fair, you picked up a lot of steam. Once we hit kind of the reset on this show over the summer, the Commanders got good. So people found the show talking about Commanders.
Yep.
The real ones that know about all of our bits and stuff are always going to be on the podcast, I feel. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. Maybe you do separate it out a little bit.
Because this is a big choice here. I've just been putting whatever we do for the show into the podcast and putting it on there. And I thought this person made a good point. He's like, just do the football stuff. And I guess for the radio show, we could do whatever we want, but that means the podcast would be shorter. And I actually don't have a problem with that unless we end up doing in season or the draft or free agency, the whole hour is on the Commanders or NFL. That could happen. I'll stop talking about this in a minute, but I actually want people's feedback. So if you hear this and see this on YouTube or hear this today, and you agree with that we should just give me the football stuff for the podcast, I will start doing that as of tomorrow. If you're no, don't listen to this person, we like when you talk about Shorzy, then I will throw everything in. So everything about things that interest me, but that could be radio only. That's possibility that stuff ends up radio only. So I'm opening the floor to all of you that are listening. And this show has grown immensely, really, and I agree with you, because the Commanders took off this year, and I think we were found a little bit. Tell me what you want. If you just want the podcast to be I also wrote back, outside of major breaking sports news, I'm not going to shy away from stuff like that. Yeah. But if that's what you want, and you want to leave the radio stuff for the radio stuff, I'll start doing that. So if that's what you want, let me know. Let me know. Now that we've put that out there, let me know what you want.
It's either that, or you also blatantly put timestamps on when we are or aren't talking about the team. I mean, that's the thing that I have found on my show as well, is throwing those timestamps up actually does make a difference in terms of when people are listening, how long they're listening, etc. So that would be the other thing. Well, I will counterpoint you just real quick here. I know people love when we talk Caps. There are people that have said we talk Caps better than a lot of other shows, and we only talk about them for a few minutes. So there is the counterpoint that people do come to our show for other things as well. So
this is an age-old thing in this market where there used to be this kind of this overlapping thing, don't talk about the Capitals on the radio because they don't get a lot. There is a semi-truth to that, but I also believe that you talk about the things you're interested in. I'm very interested in the Capitals. They are not even de facto. They easily are my second favorite team in the area. And I watched them last night. I watched them. I pay attention. I would go to more games if I had the time to do it. I love the Caps. I love hockey. So I don't ever want to shy away from it. And you've noticed, I always, unless it's a big deal, like the playoffs or when Ovi breaks the record or something like that, I leave it for a small segment, right? Sure. Because I want to talk about it and I want to be part of it, but I know you all don't want me you talk about it for 25 minutes. So I'll get off of this, but I'm not going to stop talking about them. I'm not going to stop talking about things I like. The question is, do I keep it all in the podcast, or do I separate it and say that other stuff, you're just going to have to go to the radio to hear it? I don't know. I got to think about this, but I do want to hear from other people, because I thought when this person wrote that, and it was very respectful the way they said it, it was like, I don't totally disagree with you. I know why people listen to this show, and I'm happy to supply more of that.
There's also nothing wrong with just doing two separate pods. Like, you have the Commanders one with a clear label of here's today's Commanders chatter, here's the full show as well. You can just do that too. Like, I've thrown that one around as well, where sometimes you do want that one segment or that guest segment to be on its own. So you could just do, here's the Commanders pod, here's the full pod if you want to listen to everything else. All
right. Well, let's get into it, and I will start with football. I will take your direction, and I will start that way. Here's the big news today, because a lot of movement is going on here. A lot of big names are suddenly popping up in the market. This is turning into a very interesting week. For the last few weeks, I've been looking at that free agent class, and I'm going, they're not going all in for anybody, because who would you go all in for? Well, things are starting to happen suddenly here. Max Crosby was re-signed by Vegas, which I think was really smart. They got that done. Pete Carroll's not going to let the best player on the team walk out the door on day one. That's not the way to get things started. They made him the highest paid player. This is good for Myles Garrett no matter what. He's going to top that wherever it's here or somewhere else, however that plays out. But the big name that became free yesterday, and this makes me wonder, will they just re-sign Khalil Mack now that they let Jey Bosa go? They're going to let both of their edge rush ends go. I don't know. And I know Khalil Mack's 34 years old now, but losing both of them, I don't know how you survive something like that into the offseason unless you have some kind of plan B. But Jey Bosa's free, and his whole thing is injuries. It's just been injuries over the last few years. So here's one where I will go, and I will throw it out there to everybody. Do you want him? Because he's one of the first names that have popped up that's free and clear. You don't have to trade for him now. That I go, I mean, if he's healthy, he's just a massive upgrade from what we have. But if he's not, and he really just hasn't been for them, I don't know. There's a risk reward here. And I do wonder, will they kick the tires on that one? I think a lot of teams will, but will they kick the tires on that one? Because I would bet that Adam Peters knows him a little bit because he'd signed his brother to multiple contracts. I would think he knows him a little bit. This comes down to injuries to me, but this is one of the first big names that popped up because it's free and clear. And I went, I want to know more about where he is physically right now.
I think it's also one that it might not be as high of a risk as you think either. Do you think anyone's given him a fat multi-year deal? I don't. He's so hurt. Maybe you get the 2-year with an option or something like that. But
really heavy, and would he agree to a really heavy incentive-laden deal?
Right.
We'll give you a $10 million base salary, and if you hit these benchmarks, and mainly it would be playing, we'll give you this much more. I mean, that's where I would come at it with him. And I think if it's not more than a couple of years that way, then I think the risk reward is actually very high. But, I don't think we're going to be the only ones thinking about this guy personally.
No, and I mean, you already saw the chatter yesterday where, does he go join his brother in San Francisco, right? Does he want to do that? He has an opportunity to do that, whether it's just for a year or for whatever. So I think he's also going to have his options here. Does he want to go from the West Coast to the East Coast? That's something I'm not sure of. I don't know him enough to know that that's something he wants. I think there's some X factors here, but I think with the way this team's pass rush is right now, you have to kick the tires on a guy like
100%.
This is the position that you are in. You need to do your due diligence to at least see if this is something that you want to add to your your defense. And it does become a huge risk reward for yourself, though, because if you sign him, you also need to make sure you have a backup, and they don't even have 2 starters right now. So, it does come with its own set of problems.
There's a part of me that is surprised that Dante Fowler hasn't been re-signed yet, because I know he had a very good season, but I don't think the money is going to be extraordinarily high for him. He clearly likes playing here and likes playing for this coaching staff. I can't imagine he wants to leave unless there's a deal on the table that's much better that's out there. And I don't blame him for surveying that. But there's a part of me that goes, okay, if you bring him back, here's an interesting risk type player I think you could bring in here and go, You know, if we hit the jackpot with him for a year or two, he dramatically changes our defense. So I'm interested in him, but that's also not really knowing his injury history well, only knowing that he's missed a lot of games. That's all I know.
No, he's your kind of stereotypical injury-prone player. When he's healthy, he's not just good, he's amazing. Like, he's fun to watch. You have to watch him every play. But when he's out, and it becomes this whole factor of, well, when he doesn't play, it totally affects how that defense plays. That's how it would affect it here, too, because there's not a lot of playmakers on this defense at the moment. So that would affect them moving forward. It just, to me, you also have to sign a solid backup, too. And I just don't know if this team has the luxury of being able to do that at this point.
Okay, so he's available. I'm interested. Davante Adams is available. He was cut. I think he's going to follow Aaron Rodgers wherever he goes, personally. That's what I think is going to happen.
Stupid, but
and I'll get to this in a moment. Like, him going back to Vegas with Rodgers is actually starting to feel like a distinct possibility, because I think they're running out of options out there, like the Giants are running out of options. And I think that's a possibility. But, obviously, could we use another receiver? Yeah, I think we're going to get one in the next week. I think we're going to sign somebody in the next week. I got my eyes on Darius Slayton, depending on what the price point is for him. I could make an argument for a couple of those speed receivers like McCole Hardman that are probably not going to be that expensive that you could bring in here and might be considered an upgrade. I don't know that we're done with De'Ami Brown. Let's see what the price point is for him. Like, why couldn't he come back if the price is right with him? And then, we'll see what the other ones and how it shakes out. I would love Chris Godwin. I just think the price point's going to be too high for him. We'll see. But Adams is now available. I do feel like this is one of those where he's going to dictate where he wants to go and probably will go with his buddy. That's what I think is going to happen. That said, currently he's available. I've seen a lot of people write they want him. I don't know that at his age and what his price point is going to be for a year or two, considering what they just gave up to get Deebo Samuel, I just don't know that I see it with him here. Like, if he was a few years younger, I think I could try to make a case for it. But knowing he'd only be here for 1 to 2 years, maybe, I actually don't think I want him. But that's just my opinion on it. I've seen a lot of people who like the team that are like, go after him. And I don't think so. That he's not the one to me.
I'll agree with you in saying he's not the one, but not having to give up a draft pick, signing him for 1 to 2 years I'm not opposed to that. A short-term deal. I know he's a little bit older, but he still looked very effective last year, honestly. And that was with a terrible Jets offense.
How much is he getting, though? That's what I want to know.
Right.
How much is he getting?
Because his cap hit was like 35, 40
yes.
million. It was very, very high. And I'm only willing to pay half that for him. So, and that's at most, by the way. I'm not paying any more than $20 million a year for Davante Adams, because you start to, your cap is basically then at that point, $60 million paid on your top 3 wide receivers? And
yeah, this is why I don't think they're getting Brandon Ayuk, because you'd have to take on his contract. And I'm sitting there going, this team's not going to have $90 million of wide receivers on it. Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not going to happen.
But to Davante Adams, to the point with that, 1 to 2 years, I'm okay with that. I went through it, and I mentioned it on your show yesterday, where I went through and looked at every receiver Terry McLaurin has played with. He's never played with one like Deebo Samuel. He's also never played with one like Davante Adams. He's also, of course, never played with a quarterback that's been in the same stratosphere as Jaden Daniels. This would put them completely over the top in terms of their wide receivers. And Davante's contract, if it's only for 1 or 2 years, will be done before they have to pay Jaden, or you can still go and pay Terry next year or whatever you need to do. This is the fun part about having the quarterback that doesn't make a lot of money. I'll give him the 1 or 2 year deal because I know you can kind of just get out of it later on anyways.
Okay. The other one that's out there, obviously, is DK Metcalf, who did ask for a trade. Seattle also released Tyler Lockett, who's going to end up in their Ring of Fame. He had an incredible career for them. Lockett, to me, very quickly, I don't think he's the one at all for them. I think he's just a little bit older. I think he's an outstanding professional receiver. I'm sure he will end up somewhere. If we're going to take a shot on somebody, though, give me Adams or DK, which is a different body type, different level stratosphere type of player. I do not want to trade for DK Metcalf. We've already done that. If he ends up getting released, which I don't think he will, I do believe he will be traded for because I think he's kind of too high level of a talent just to hit the open market. If somehow he gets to that point, yes, I'm interested in him. I actually think the price point for him on the open market will be higher than Davante Adams, though. So you will have to make your choice there. I don't think he's going to get there. I think he's going to get dealt in the next few days because I think someone's going to give them something for him to not allow him to get to free agency. Like Pat Mahomes may want him, Josh Allen may want him. Like I got a feeling somebody's going to step up and make that play and bring him on their team. But if he were to be free and clear, he's another interesting one. But to your point about, we only really, if you're going to take someone like this on, you're only going to take him on for a couple of years anyway. Adams being free and clear, and probably because of his age, at not the same price point as Metcalf. Like, I think you're going to be re-signing him to the $30+ million a year contract if you get him. I don't think you have to do that with Adams. That's why I'm not really sure what his price point is. I suppose I would rather take a shot with Adams for a year or two than DK, knowing what you'd probably have to do to secure him, which is trade for him and give him a new longer-term contract.
DK is getting traded because he wants the new contract. So you do have to trade for him and hand him the money. This is always kind of the double-edged sword in the NFL. When a player wants to be traded for the new contract, you have to give up assets and pay them. I'm just not interested to do it with DK. They don't need to do it with DK when they already have Terry, when they just traded for Debo. I will say this about DK, though. He is younger than Terry and Debo. He's 27. So, you are getting a guy in his prime, essentially. I just don't think it's in the cards for them to trade and give him that contract. And the Seahawks are already far off on what they want. Diana Rossini tweeted this morning, they want a first and a third. That's the starting point. I don't think they're going to get that for him. I think they'll get some mid-round picks, second-round pick probably at most. But when you have to pay the guy, the trade is a little bit harder because you have to swallow trading the first-round pick and the contract. A lot of people don't want to do that right now. And as we're just talking about right now, the market is semi-flooded with these wide receivers.
There's a lot of them.
We're talking about
when free agency rolled around, I'm like, this is the position the Commanders are going to address because there are actually a lot of options. The other things they need, offensive line and defensive line, show me the guys you think that they really need to go all in on. There really aren't that many of them.
It's all about asset management. You can trade for DK, or you can go sign Davante Adams, or you can go sign Chris Godwin, or you could probably get Cooper Kupp for next to nothing at this point. Like Les Snead said yesterday, the most unlikely outcome is for him to return as a Ram, essentially. So I think you could get similar production for a similar price. Not unlike Lockett, by the way. Lockett's a 10-year vet. You can send him to a short deal. That's a really expensive short-term deal because he's a 10-year vet. You can get an Olamide Zaccheaus that does the same thing probably for similar production. So I think this is all about asset management. Good luck to a team that wants to trade a first and then some for DK and hand him the contract.
Yeah.
I don't see it happening.
Yeah, I don't see him happening here either for all of those reasons. But Adams, you've convinced me a little bit. Maybe I should think a little differently about him. He's 34 now, but I want to know what the number is. I still think in the end, he's probably going to go wherever Rodgers goes. That's what I think is going to happen. Or he loves Derek Carr. Are the Saints somehow, can they fit him in and make it in? I don't know. I really don't know. Going back to the Raiders for a moment, Max Crosby, when he chirped up a couple days ago that I want Aaron Rodgers in Las Vegas, I went, well, he's not going anywhere. He obviously is re-signing with them. And Pete Carroll's their coach now. Pete Carroll's in his 70s. Pete Carroll needs to try to win very quickly. So I'm not so sure that this is the wrong route for a year or two. Of all the teams where you know what you're getting when you bring him in, of all the teams that I think could take it on, the media coverage will be less than some of these other markets. I actually buy that that's probably the right place for him to go to. That if he were to go there, that he's a massive upgrade from however you feel about him now, he's a massive upgrade from where they were. He's in a weird market where he can do weird stuff and it won't make waves. And he's with a coach that I think will know how to kind of handle the rigmarole of it. This coach been around the block a million times. I don't know. I actually think this is the first time I've heard something for Rodgers and his future that actually makes sense to me. And I actually think it'd be a good place for him to go. Adams could go back to Vegas, I bet, and play with him if he wanted to.
Also, think about how the media in New York treats every single word with every single dramatic of every single player that plays in that town. Whereas in Vegas, ain't nobody talking about Rodgers when he's on with McAfee. Like, nobody cares that much to pay attention that much to that interview or whatever. So I'm with you. I think the vibe fits here. We kind of knew it last year when they went into the season with Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. That thing was going to go off the rails fast. It did. I'm with you. It is exponentially better. I will say, though, your boom or bust with Rodgers is very high. Like, if he cannot look healthy again with that Achilles, it's going to be very, very, very bad. But
nobody is going to sign him to more than a 2-year deal, though. So that's the reality here is like, you're going to get out of it. Like, he's at the point now where you can go, all right, we'll take a chance. And if it blows up in our face, we're out of it the next year. And they don't have anybody better than him. And they're staring down, do we really want to pick Shedeur Sanders with a top 10 pick? That's what they're staring down right now.
And I mean, the other part about this too is like, if it wasn't for Jaden Daniels, Brock Bowers would have gotten a lot more hype last year. I mean, like near the second half of the year, like people were really starting to pay attention. There's two quarterbacks I just mentioned, plus I forget who else they had else playing on their third quarterback. Bowers' numbers were incredible for who was throwing him the ball. So
he broke a record.
They have a legitimate number one threat at tight end, probably the next Hall of Fame tight end too. Like, don't underrate that either, that they have a legitimate weapon that's just as good as a number one wide receiver.
Yes. I was saying this in the middle of the season. I'm like, everyone keeps talking about Bo Nix. Brock Bowers is the guy who should be garnering some votes for Rookie of the Year. Yeah. He broke a record for tight ends ever in a rookie season. He had an incredible year based on how bad their offense was. Yes. I advocate for this. I actually think this is the right thing for them to do. If I'm them, Pete Carroll's going to pick a rookie that they're marginal about to be his first quarterback when he's not. Like, they're going to get either Cousins or Rodgers or somebody. They're going to get or Darnold. They're going to get somebody who's been around the block. There's just no chance that they're starting from ground zero with a rookie quarterback unless it's Cam Ward. They have to trade up to get him. What are they trading up to get him for? I bet you this makes sense to me. Like, this actually makes sense. You can either pay 4 or 5 years, $100 bazillion to get Sam Darnold, or you could do a 1-2 year bridge here with Rodgers. Let's say you like Jackson Dart or this guy from Louisville. You can draft them maybe in the second round.
Correct.
And put him behind a guy like Rodgers. Rodgers is your starter. He's not going to mentor him because he never does. But, like, you never know. Like, I actually feel like that's the first time I've heard one where I'm like, I think it's the right spot for him to go there.
You can at least do it, and Rodgers can't get pissed off because he knows he's only going to be there for a year or two. So, I mean, you can't actually pull that one off. I'm with you, though. I think the second round names are going to be interesting at quarterback to see what happens, who gets added, and then who's going to be essentially be groomed for the next year or two.
All right, that's what's happening out there. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about John Allen. Bram wants to show ESPN 630 Sports Capital.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. During tax season, your personal info travels to a lot of places. Between payroll, your tax consultant, and the IRS. If your W-2 gets exposed, that's just the ticket for identity thieves. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it guaranteed or your money back. Don't let identity thieves take you for a ride. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
All right, welcome back. Will the Commanders find a trade partner for John Allen in the next few days? I don't know. It sounds like, at least the reporting was, Peters tried to get San Francisco to take Allen's salary in almost a swap of salaries. And either way, Washington is going to, so that they're in, I guess they probably were offering do this in lieu of giving up a pick is what sounds like the sell was. And the reporting, if it's accurate, sounds like San Francisco thought about that and said, can we up? Because Javon Hargrave's out. They're shedding salary like crazy right now. They're resetting. They're totally shedding salary. Brandon Ayuk's probably going to get dealt if there's a taker for him. And I don't know who wants that contract now, but like if there's a taker, probably get dealt. They just let Hargrave go, who's been injured. I think you're going to see more of this. There's a couple of other 49ers that I'm looking at going, I don't know, man. Like, they may end up here because of Peter's relationship with a couple of them. But if it's not going to be them, and it's not, like, who's going to step up and get him before he gets to free agency? I thought the Odigizua signing helped Washington with trying to retrieve something out of somebody, because he was the best interior defensive lineman available outside of Milton Williams. Now that he's off the board, now you start to ask teams, do you really want him to get to free agency, or do you want to try to get a trade to jump ahead of the line? Because there will be a market for him for sure. So I'm still hopeful, but, you know, in the end, what are they going to get back? Maybe the pick that they gave up for Debo. That's the maybe that they would get out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I've pretty much resorted to like a 6th round pick is probably what gets it done here if you really want him. I am still team, how do we not have a player for player trade? Like, whether it's John Allen or someone else, like there are so many players available at this point. I just can't fathom that someone can't find 2 puzzle pieces that fit for each other. But here we are. Maybe that happens more closer to the draft. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you. Somebody is going to want him, I think. But at the same time, we still don't quite know the intricacies of what this deal is going to entail. Like, is John only going to a place where he wants an extension? That's a question that I have. I don't know if that's the case. Like, is he picking up to move all the way to the West Coast to just play there for a year? I don't know. So I think that's the other part of this that we don't really know about is we know that they gave him permission, but basically it was, we're going to do right by you to trade you somewhere. I don't know if the contractor is make or break with him, or if a team has an expectation that they're going to sign him to an extension as well. So I think that's the other factor here of why they probably haven't found a dance partner yet when it comes to it.
Yeah. Okay. So here's what I've been told about this, you know, and this is all like, it's not from Peter's group. They don't talk about anything, but like, this is my understanding of what's going on. By the end of it, and even now, he actually wants to come back.
Yeah.
But they are reluctant to give him an extension, which, no kidding. If they were to give him an extension, I think it would be, and I don't think they're open to it, but I think it would be at a pay cut. And I don't know if he wants to do that. So, you know, it's kind of my understanding, like, you could play this out for a year and then hit the open market, you know, but if you want an extension, we think it's probably best for both sides to move on. So that's my understanding of where it is, that wasn't pushing for this, doesn't really want to go, but also wants security. I don't blame him. And, you know, his production went down, and then he had an injury-riddled season, and there's a lot of cap room to be recouped by just moving on. They don't want to extend him beyond this year. So I think they're just kind of in a, let's just end this now, and let's do right by you. Like, we don't dislike you. Let's do right by you, and let's see what happens. I don't think he's coming back, although I do think for a while there, that was his first choice, which, you know, it's been an up and down road the last couple of years with him here. I think he got as frustrated as anybody with the end of the Ron situation. Like, I think he was just like throwing his hands up going, how many rebuilds are we going to go through here in my career? And then everything really changed last year very quickly. And he went, well, we just got the right one. And I think it all changed his mindset about all of it. And then all of a sudden he goes, you know, the idea of playing out your career in one place becomes very, very palatable when it's all going right, and it's all going right. But I think the ship has kind of sailed on it. And if you go and you ask for something that the team isn't really ready to do, unless you're willing to take a massive pay cut to do it, which I wouldn't if I were him, then I think we've just hit the crossroads of it's time to move on. So I do expect him to be released if they can't find a trade partner. And I'm with you. I'd love to see them find a player for player one, because I'd love to recoup some of these draft picks, but we have holes to fill on this team, and we have holes to fill immediately. And that's why we traded for Deebo Samuel. We have a hole that needs to be filled. If we could figure out something where he gets dealt and we get someone back who's perceived as a starter for us, I think it's a win for everybody.
No, it's exactly right. Like, I know they need to fill in the roster here, and this could even be a multiple player trade. Like, maybe you like somebody's backups. Like, we're at this point where I'll listen to anything when it comes to having the talent here. And with John too, with just how management has dealt with him, you know, this group's new. John is not. John's from the area here. Like, this is one that I commend the organization to not get emotional about. Like, this is what smart organizations do. They move on from guys faster than it looks it on the field, essentially. So I commend the organization the way they're going about it. I would say this to John, too. Like, dude, when you finish out your career, come back here if you want to. And I'm sure, like, the team will still want to use you in some capacity,
100%.
whether that's in the office or in the media or whatever. Like, you're a legend here. You grew up here. You grew up a Redskins fan. Like, I would hope they even say that to him. Like, this is no hard feelings. Come back to us when you're done because we want to have you around. Because
100%.
Because, like, before they defined what a commander was, like when Terry talked about that before the Eagles game, that was John. Like, John was always that way. And so I will say that, just like, I know they're getting rid of him this offseason, but I would say he can come back anytime he wants.
I agree. I don't think it's acrimonious, and it really shouldn't be for what he represented for all those years where things were really wonky with him.
It took him 7 years to blow up, like
yes, 7 years to finally go, I'm going to dress up and I'm going to freak out on people if this doesn't go well.
Right. Exactly.
All right. So I have a revelation here. I think Myles Garrett's going to get traded, and I'm going to tell you why. And I don't know to who. But I actually think, one, he seems to be forcing the issue and seems to be very serious about it. And now that Max Crosby got what he got, that's the benchmark. Yep. Cleveland could top it and throw the exact same contract that's bumped up above Crosby and go, do you want that? And that's where he has to say, no, I don't. And that will start the ball rolling. But I was thinking about this. All right. Tennessee's going to trade out of number one. I believe that because I think either the Giants, and they're the most likely candidate because they're striking out. They tried to get Stafford. They struck out. I suppose they could trade for Cousins if they really wanted to, and they could do that. I suppose they could sign Darnold. I suppose they could do this. All of these things feel very they feel very 3 years ago when Ron called everybody and said, we want your quarterback. That's how they feel to me right now. Very, very desperate. And I think in the end, if they strike out a couple more times, they're going to turn to overpaying to get the number one pick to take Cam Ward. And they're going to sell that they got the best quarterback. Tennessee's going to get this crazy haul that includes just moving back to number 3 and taking Travis Hunter or whoever, which means Cleveland, if they want to get Cam Ward, and I'm not sure that they do, but if they do, they have to get to number 1. They have to think this way, that they have to trade to do it. I don't think they would trade Myles Garrett and the number 2 overall pick to get the number 1 to make sure that would happen. But think about this for a moment. Okay, let's just say this scenario plays out, that the Giants or the Jets or the Raiders, and I think it's really the Giants or the Jets, get desperate and they go, we're going to give Tennessee whatever they want to make sure we get to number 1 and jump Cleveland. Who's sitting at number 2? Abdul Carter is sitting at number 2. That's Garrett's replacement. That's his replacement. So this is why I think he's going to get his wish and he's going to be traded because they're going to pick his replacement in the draft. He's going to fall into their lap. Tennessee's not going to take him, so they're going to trade out of that pick. So he's just going to be sitting. The best player in the draft is going to be sitting there. It happens to be the position that Garrett plays. He's making a fraction of what Garrett wants, and they can turn around and trade Myles Garrett for whatever the haul is. And in all likelihood, and the better scenario for them is next year. Get draft picks next year, not this year. You don't want these quarterbacks this year. You want whatever's coming out next year. That's what you want. So I'm starting to see it, feel it, and believe it that he's actually going to get traded. But it's going to be because Tennessee trades out of 1 and Abdul Carter lands in their lap. That's what I think is going to happen.
Well, we're also starting to get the reports, too, like we mentioned it the other day, where Rappaport's coming out and saying, oh, the Eagles actually can't make this happen.
That's right.
We're starting to get into the nitty-gritty of what teams will actually be able to do this. Like, the Max Crosby trade was big yesterday, too, because they gave him that contract. It's like $34 million a year. That's the deal for Garrett. He's going to get probably $1 million or 2 more, but it's around the same. Everyone knows the benchmark.
Now we know the number. Yes.
And at the same time, you go, all right, well, the Raiders aren't going to trade for him. So, like, you knock them off the list. You knock off all of the non-contenders. I think what's happening here is they're probably they're not talking, but they're surveying the landscape of going, okay, Garrett only wants to go to a contender. We know who those guys are. And now it's who can actually pull that off. And that's where we got that Eagles report of Rappaport going, actually, they can't do whatever they want. They don't have the room to do it. And we saw what they did yesterday and the day before where they signed Saquon. They signed Zach Bond to that big contract too. So, like, they're also moving on a little bit here too, knowing they can't get him. It's going to be whoever in free agency doesn't get exactly what they want or still has the cap space to do so that they actually make the move for him.
The team I'm watching is Buffalo. Von Miller's old. Von Miller's going to be gone. They need to replace him. They've been knocking on the door forever. They're the ones that need to get over the top. It's not going to be the Bengals. They're trying to figure out if they're going to pay Trey Hendrickson. And if they're not going to pay Chase, Higgins, and Henderson, they're not trading to get Myles Garrett. So it's not them. Cleveland can't trade him to Baltimore. People will lose their minds. So they can't trade him there. The Eagles or the Commanders at least are palatable to them. They could ship them off to the NFC, but I don't think the Commanders are going to give up what Cleveland wants to get them because it's going to be multiple first-round picks. The Eagles could potentially do it if they really, really wanted to, but I don't think that necessarily they do. And I do semi-believe if he was going to Washington or Detroit, they might step in to make that happen. Would Detroit do it? Maybe. Maybe. Do they have the cap room to do it? Maybe. Do they feel like Buffalo does, that we're just right there? We got to do everything within our power to try to win one of these things. But, before we run out of time in our window, they seem like a logical team that might do it. Tampa Bay, who's actually been aggressive in the past, they might do it because they're sitting there going, we have this team. We think we have a shot to win with it. Let's go try to, whether that's believable or not. But they've been in the playoffs every year last night. Those are the teams I look at. I think Buffalo and Detroit are the two teams I would look at that go, their fan bases are so dying to win. They know that the window is right now, right here. It's been this way for a few years. They just haven't gotten over the top. Let's just overpay and do it. Those are the teams that I would look at. But it will be, I think, partially, Cleveland wants this to play out. The next move is the Crosby deal just happened. We now know what the number is. Here's a number that's bigger than that. Will you take it and stay and play with us? And if he says no to that, then you start the ball rolling. And to me, if I'm them, I just sit back and I go, his replacement is going to get drafted. He's going to fall into our lap. We're going to get the best player in the draft who happens to play his position. It will allow us to make this deal, and it will happen after the draft or after the trade of the number one pick, where it's certain that Cam Ward's going to go number one to somebody. That's when I think it's going to happen.
The other team that I would throw out there, only because they have just so many players and clearly the pieces didn't work out last year and they're wheeling and dealing already, is Chicago. I feel like Chicago could say, do you want some draft picks? Do you want us to throw in one of those offensive weapons to get it done there? And that's a city that maybe Garrett would like to go to, right? Chicago is a lot more of a popular place than Cleveland is when it comes to, being recognized, all of that. Does he think Chicago's a contender? That's probably the question there, but I like what Chicago's already done. They pretty much said, we need to protect Caleb. They've now traded 2 draft picks to get 2 starters along the offensive line. That's a team. I'm not going to try to fall for the hype again, but they're making the right moves again in the offseason. I think they could
100%.
be a team. They could be a team that says, we have all this talent, including do you want an edge rusher and Montez Sweat back too? They could say, take your pick. We can make this work. We can exchange some players here too if you really want to go about it. So that's a team that I'm just throwing as a dark horse. I know no one sees them as contenders, but they've made all the right moves again in the offseason. That's one that I'm just tossing out there as well for him.
Yeah, they're valuing the offensive line again. I think it's Ben Johnson showing you actually where his priorities are. It's not just scheme. He goes, we need a great offensive line. They've coached with Jonah Jackson before. I don't know what they get out of Joe Thuney, but it's way better than what they had. I think they've had an outstanding start. To wait to see what they've done to fix the real problem that they have, and they ought to be rekindled in thought and thinking that they're going in the right direction again for sure. Yep. So we'll see where they are. There's one other thing I want to talk about, and this is what I'm describing now as the Shador situation, which is all of a sudden he's getting a lot of hate out of the combine off of a couple people saying he showed an ego or he was brash or whatever. They didn't like his interviews. I was nitpicky on him, and I think a lot of the scout people that you hear from would go, I don't know that I see it on tape, honestly. I actually don't care about all the interview stuff. I'm not worried about him that way. I know he's going to be a professional. I know what his pedigree is. yeah, he's Deion's kid. He's gonna have an ego. Like I'm not worried about that part of it at all. Like I actually think he'll be fine. Like in another case where somebody who doesn't have the background that he has, I'd be worried about it. But I'm not worried. That part I'm literally not worried about. Like his personality, I'm not worried about any of that with him. It's his play. It's his decision making. It's his overall athleticism. It's like this game is faster than college. And when I watch him play, I go, this guy is going to break the rookie sack record. Like he doesn't get rid of the ball fast enough. He's not mobile enough. That's all. Like that's all it is. And what's interesting though is, and Florio's great at this. He wrote a piece where he's basically like, some of all this stuff could be a little bit manufactured from Shedor's side, because Deion's made no bones about the idea that he wants his son to play in certain places without saying where those certain places are. So if he's making certain teams not like the idea of drafting his son, even if it costs him money and slides him down the board a little bit, in the end, it might be a win to get him to land where they want him to be. And I buy that theory a little bit here, that they don't mind some teams not liking him. Like, actually, that's part of the process here. Like, most players go in and they're like, try to make everybody like you because you want to get drafted as high as possible. Deion's made it kind of clear that he'd rather his son play for some place where he thinks he could win, like wherever that is, whether he's right or wrong. And he's so part of this, like, oh, you guys don't like my kid? Fine, don't. And I feel like that's actually, there's some truth to that.
Well, we've also seen this in years past where players don't want to go to certain organizations and they tank the interview on purpose.
Yeah.
And sometimes that doesn't stop teams either. Like they know what the player is doing, but we've heard about this in the past where a player will show up to a meeting and just act nonchalant and not even act like he gives a you-know-what because he doesn't want to be drafted to that organization. I don't put it past Shedor to be doing that to a couple of these teams. And that's where those reports came out where, oh, I don't like his attitude. I didn't like how nonchalant he was. Where you and I are going, it's Shedor Sanders. You know what you're signing up for. Like we've seen this guy in the spotlight for the last 3 years, essentially, at 2 different places. So this has always been part of the game. I just think it's getting a little bit more WWE style with Shedor. Like they are being strategic about what they're saying. And I think he was strategic on who he actually talked to at the combine as well.
Yeah, probably. Like Deion knows what he's doing. And that's why, like, a lot of this stuff, like when I hear this, oh, he was this way in the interviews. Yeah, maybe on purpose. It's very possible. Very, very possible. All right, we'll be right back. Bram Watch the Show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. All right, welcome back. Will this be the last cap segment I do on the podcast, but not on the radio show, but on the podcast? That'll be up to you, as we've asked you, do you want the podcast to be really just football and Commanders only? And I may take your suggestion too. There might be here's the other stuff we talked about podcast, altcast, and see how it does. I'll have to change the logo and all that stuff. We'll have to see. We'll talk about all these things, but I'm waiting for your reaction today. In the meantime, while I still have your attention for a moment, nice comeback last night in MSG. The Capitals really turned it on in the third period. They got a goal from Ovi. It was a beauty on the power play. Got the bizarre, had a penalty in waiting while they scored and got a second back-to-back power play because they scored before the Rangers could touch the puck, before it would have been 5-on-3. So it remained 5-on-4. They didn't score there. They got to overtime. Strome made an unbelievable play in overtime to kind of pull the string and set up Tom Wilson for a gimme to win it for them. It's another one of these, like, they haven't been great really the last couple of weeks. But not unlike the Ottawa game, which they blew a big lead, and that was kind of a weird one. But they won. And I know the Rangers are sellers right now. They're not having the season they had a year ago. But they went there, and they won. And when it mattered in the third period on, they were by far the better team last night.
You got to remember, too, tomorrow is the trade deadline. And so you have teams like the Rangers that are fighting for that last wild card spot. Their desperation is at an all-time high. I mean, that's why I think they've had some trouble over the last week. Here's a team that is the number one team in the Eastern Conference, clear of Carolina by 10 points in their division, only trail Winnipeg by a couple. And they drew, essentially, the Rangers, the Senators, and the Flames in the last week, who are all desperate to get someone at the trade deadline and not have their teams be blown up. I said it last week. I'll say it again. the team's desperation versus the Caps kind of, I don't want to call it cruising, but the Caps not having that desperation is what has shown up in the last week or so. So a gutsy win for them last night. And last night, too, this is the first time I've seen Charlie Lindgren get kind of fired up. The Rangers traded Ryan Lindgren, and he loved being – the quote from Charlie was he loved being a Ranger, so this one was kind of for him. So he was a little bit more fired up than normal, and the team seemed to rally around that a little bit as well, that essentially he said, I know for a fact he's missed over there. So old Petey Lob's not giving a great hand over there at the Rangers, but I think the Caps also kind of got up to get Charlie his first win since he signed that contract extension. So there's a little bit more emotion to it last night, and look at how – they played. Like you mentioned, Strom's amazing play to Wilson. Ovi's timeliness as of late has been really good too. The way that they're playing, I'm not really like mad at. They're just going up against desperate teams right now.
Yeah. Ovi did score again, so it's 10. We're 10 away from the record, so it is feeling very likely that it's going to happen before the end of the season. And I'll say this too, to your point about him, is kind of timeliness. There seems to be some juice in the tank for him. I remember like a year ago, the last couple of years, there were games where like it was actually hard to watch him skate. Like there were just nights where you're like, oh my God, it was like old timers day and he was just a non-factor that way. And it almost felt like he's just cherry picking, waiting for a moment to get a shot off. That actually hasn't been the case the last like this year, really. He looks like maybe he got himself in better shape or something. Maybe he's kept himself in better shape, but like his legs are under him more than I think they were in the last year or two. And it's nice to see. And it's a big part of why their record is what it is. Like they're trying to thread a needle here. They put together a team that's way, way, way more competitive. The signings they made, most of them were hits. And they've ended up in the position they're in, which is a surprise to everybody. But at the same time, they're trying to break this record, but not trying to make a big deal of it. But they got to put him on the ice. And is he a liability when he's on the ice? And this year, he really isn't. So he's held up his end of the bargain when he said, I don't want to play for a team that isn't competitive. I think there's a tacit understanding that you can't be a liability when you're out there too. And he doesn't seem to have that right now.
10 goals in his last 12 games. That's so stupid for a 39-year-old forward. Like, that's ridiculous. He's on an absolute tear. And to your point about him getting in shape, we saw all the reports and we saw the workout videos. That's all he did during this Four Nations break was work out in Florida, try to get his body right. It's worth mentioning. He broke his freaking leg and then jumped back into the lineup, essentially, and he didn't really look the same. So it was good timing that he got to basically hit the reset button, train up a little bit, and he has looked very good. And here's the other thing that I just want to mention too. This locker room, I've known this since September. The chemistry is off the charts. And I've known that pretty much since training camp, that these guys meshed really, really well. Don't undermine that factor too of why Ovechkin is playing so well this season too. This might be the first locker room in a long time where he just feels really, really comfortable and he can go out there and play. And nobody minds that the records and stuff are happening. It helps motivate them a little bit too.
Real quick, Maryland got a very good win last night against Michigan.
Yep.
Off that buzzer beater loss to Michigan State, things can go sideways. They've won 2 in a row. One was barely against a bad Penn State team, but this was a good one on the road last night. So congratulations to them as they get set for conference tournament play, which is next week. And speaking of that, tonight, good luck to my Eagles, who opened the Patriot League tournament against Lafayette tonight in Bender Arena quarterfinal. If they win, they're guaranteed to host a semifinal match, and then it will depend who they're playing in the championship. If they are the top seed there, because they're the 2 seed going in, even though they were co-champs, if they are the top seed in the final, they'll host it. So I wish my Eagles luck tonight as well. All right, everybody, talk to you tomorrow. Bram and Callow, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.